Venezuela's Congress backed unanimously the Memorandum of Understanding signed between the constitutional government and the opposition sectors as part of the dialogues initiated in Mexico. Human rights organizations in Colombia denounced the critical situation in the deported reservation communities. The Taliban have expressed preparedness to establish an Islamic government in Afghanistan. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your host, Gladys Quesada, and now we begin with the news. The Memorandum of Understanding signed by the constitutional government and the opposition of Venezuela as part of the dialogues initiated in Mexico was backed unanimously by the Venezuela National Assembly. In an ordinary session on Tuesday, the legislative branch approved in unanimity an agreement supporting the conversations that seek to consolidate democracy, social stability, and pacific coexistence. The President of Parliament, Jorge Rodriguez, highlighted the efforts of multiple political sectors in the talk process. He seized the occasion to ask the international community to stop harassing and pressuring Venezuela.
All of us implicated parts acknowledge that we understand the need to lift the sanctions imposed on the Venezuelan state, restating as inalienable rights of the nation those of independence, freedom, sovereignty, immunity, territorial integrity, and national self-determination. All of us acknowledge this, so no one can be excluded. We will stay because God grants victory to those who persevere, and we vote for them to stay too. We vote so everyone feels included in this process of seeking a peace agreement. That is why, just as I must vote for the agreement proposal presented humbly, I want to propose to this plenary that the Memorandum of Understanding also be approved by the National Assembly of Venezuela, to the effect that the law be published even though we know it is not a law in the technical definition. Do not correct me on this, but it will be an act that comes from the sovereignty of the National Assembly of Venezuela. In consequence, this Memorandum of Understanding will be published in the official Gazette of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, if your representative determine it to be so.
And the Cuban medical mission arrived in Haiti to alleviate the health collapse following the 7.2 earthquake that hit the country on August 14th. Many of these doctors are deployed in the most remote areas of the country to treat hundreds of Haitians arriving in trucks with exposed fractures and other injuries. With barely enough time to eat, the Cuban health workers are even working in the open air. In hospitals, they help to improvise. Haiti already has more than 1,900 fatalities and more than 10,000 injured in the aftermath of the earthquake. The national hospital network is suffocated by poverty, corruption, and the pandemic.
Cuban collaboration in Haiti since 1998 will be one of the best kept secrets in the world. August 14, 2021, an earthquake of 7.2 degrees again hit Asian lands. Once again, Cuba is present in Port-au-Prince with 253 doctors who quickly moved to the affected places, treated the wounded, and adapted at a hospital for emergency surgeries. The images hurt. It hurts to know that it will take time to return to normal, but the medical brigades from the island accompany the Asian people in coups, earthquakes, and epidemics, and other complex situations, and the current crisis will be no different.
In Brazil, the National Federation of Postmail and Telegraph workers announced its decision to go on a strike of indefinite duration on Wednesday, opposing the privatization of the company. The state-backed sectors of the organization had already begun the halting of services on Tuesday. The communication secretary of the Federation, Emerson Marinho, informed that the national direction reaffirmed the strike schedule on August 18th at 00:00 hours. Marinho pointed out that several assemblies will be held with the third night shift. The protest, he informed, will go on for an undetermined period of time The workers' demands involve improvements of the working conditions and payments, along with putting a stop to the companies ravaging by Jair Bolsonaro's project of giving it away to the private sector. The Vice President of the Brazilian Senate Commission that investigates the government's management of the COVID-19 crisis disclosed on Tuesday that there is evidence indicating that the President, Jair Bolsonaro, is responsible for falsifying a public document linked to the handling of the pandemic. Randolph Rodriguez, the second in charge of the investigation commission, validated the suspicions of Bolsonaro based in his case of misinformation about COVID-19 on inexisting evidence. Bolsonaro had said in early stage of the sanitary crisis that the numbers of infections and deaths due to the disease were being overdimensioned by governors and mayors without any real proof to back up his accusation. The document Bolsonaro based his claims on turns out was redacted by Alexandre Marques of the Court of Auditors, who in talks with the Commission disclosed that the document's information was tampered and flawed. With this statement, the Commission of the High Chamber indicated that the President was wrong to use the document and not verify the validity of this content. In Martinique, funeral companies face an excess of services amid a rise in COVID-19 cases and fatalities. The Caribbean overseas French territory has recently closed borders to tourists and imposed a lockdown for nationals as health authorities registered 1,200 cases per 100,000 inhabitants.
Normally, one burial a day, already one team working a fair amount, and since COVID, we can say that we are practically running at 3 burials a day. Yesterday we had 5 burials, today we have 2, tomorrow we have 3. We are extremely sought after, and as most deaths occur in hospitals, we are called upon to relieve congestions in the funeral home and to come and collect the deceased.
New Zealand entered into a new lockdown after new positive cases were confirmed. According to Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, New Zealanders must brace for additional COVID-19 cases from an outbreak that has plunged the country into a snap lockdown. The official also said they were dealing with the highly transmissible Delta variant linked to the outbreak in Australia that authorities have so far been unable to contain. The rapid rise justified the Prime Minister's decision to issue nationwide stay-at-home orders. The new infections ended a 6-month run without local transmission in New Zealand, which has recorded only 26 COVID-19 fatalities in a population of 5 million since the start of the pandemic. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back. Human rights organizations in Colombia denounce the critical situation in which communities of the deported reservation live. Irregular armed groups engage in combat and cause displacements in Deported, an area of the Chocó department in western Colombia, since August 15. There has been reports of forced recruitment of underage residents and of the confinement of 3 communities, Pizarro, Baudosito, and Union San Juan, which has hampered families from going out to their jobs or looking for basic supplies. Due to the situation, human rights platforms and local organizations have called upon national authorities, such as the General Attorney, the police, and the international community to protect the population.
I am, alongside my Board of Executive, asking the government to stop the crossfire. I am demanding the fundamental rights we have as inhabitants of the sub-region of San Juan and the ending of the armed conflict, for it is us who are paying the high cost of war. For over 4 days today, our communities are in the middle of the war and the crossfire. We can't stand it anymore. Please end the war in these territories. We call upon the government and the armed actors present in these territories of the Colombian Pacific of the Chocó Department. Please end the war. To the entities that supposedly defend national and international human rights. Please, we need help in our territories. We cannot live in peace. We need the termination of the war, the armed conflict, so we can live a peaceful life. Make sure that the peace dialogues are followed through, that the points signed by the government and the FARC are carried out with healthy closure.
Asylum seekers from Central American countries continue to be deported from the United States to Mexico in conditions that violate their fundamental rights. The first of 6 flights carrying families from Central American asylum seekers who were deported by the U.S. government landed at the international airport of Tapachula, Chiapas. The flight arrived from McAllen, Texas, where asylum seekers were transferred by bus to the border city of Talisman. Due to COVID-19 pandemic, overloaded planes are not allowed. Therefore, more flights from Texas with hundreds of asylum seekers will arrive in the coming days.
Has not eaten since yesterday. He was supposed to receive food and nothing. We are treated like garbage. He has not eaten. We began to step down from the bus, and they're crossing the border. They just handed us over just like that. Here the migration authorities, well, the Guatemala police, nothing. We just got out in the border and just crossed the line just like that.
Due to the consecutive deportations of migrants who come from Central America, the representative of Guatemala, Mario Ernesto Galvez, considered that Mexico shouldn't get involved in the inhumane policies implemented by Joe Biden's administration.
The government of Mexico should respond to these express deportations, because we understand that they are being returned with consent from said government, and that by doing so, it is reinforcing a treaty signed by a previous administration, providing for humanitarian reasons an escort and a transport in more suitable conditions, at least up until the border with us here in Guatemala, seeking with this at all moments to protect the physical integrity of the travelers, especially the underage ones, who are part of deported families. It is not what you can expect from democratic and progressive governments like those in power in the United States and our brotherly neighbor, Mexico.
And now we move on to other topics. The interdisciplinary group of independent experts of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights issued a report proving that human rights violations occurred in Bolivia during the 2019 coup. During the 8-month investigation, experts concluded that in the Bolivian political crisis, there were very serious human rights violations, including summary executions, massacres, racism, torture, and sexual assault. It determined that 38 people died and many others were injured, sexually harassed, temporarily abducted, tortured, racially discriminated, improperly detained, processed without due process, and other abuses. The most serious events were the Sacaba massacre on November 15th and the Sincara massacre on November 19th, 2019.
A political conflict shrouded by violence. At least 37 people lost their lives in different parts of the country, and hundreds were seriously injured, both physically and psychologically. What happened is the responsibility of the state due to the actions of state and private agents in the circumstances contemplated according to IACHR jurisdiction.
And the experts also referred to the excessive and disproportionate use of force performed by the police and armed forces, alike during the Bolivia's de facto administration of Yanin Áñez.
The police and the armed forces, separately or in joint operations, used excessive and disproportionate force and did not prevent acts of violence, leaving citizens unprotected. On the other hand, individuals promoted and organized acts of violence and attacks on public and private property. The interdisciplinary group of independent experts is unequivocal on describing the events of Sakawa and Sankata as massacres. The victims must receive justice, reparation for the damages, and immediate attention to heal the wounds.
And evidence of foreign participation in the 2019 coup in Bolivia continues to emerge. Former member of the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, Paulo Bro, revealed a letter dated November 16, 2019, where the former Minister of Government of Ecuador, Maria Paula Romo, agreed to send anti-riot materials to Bolivia, responding to the de facto government request under the principle of international reciprocity. The procedure was signed between Bolivia's former de facto president, Yanin Áñez, and former President of Ecuador, Lenín Moreno. According to a report from the Ecuadorian police, 5,000 GL-302 hand grenades, 500 sound and flash grenades for outdoor use, over 2,000 long-range 37mm caliber projectiles, and 560 short-range similar caliber projectiles were sent to Bolivia in late 2019. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The Taliban are ready to establish an Islamic government in Afghanistan, expressed Zabihullah Mujahid, the spokesperson of that organization, which recently took control over the country. After religious practices, the Taliban held an encounter where Mujahid affirmed that all was ready to arrange an agreement that will allow an Islamic government in Afghanistan. The spokesperson also referred to the current situation, assuring that within the following days, security will improve, especially in the capital, Kabul. The Taliban declared the Islamic Emirate is committed to all of the countries of the world in not being a threat to any state, but made clear that the Afghans have a right to adjust and dictate the rules, and that foreign observers must respect this. Mujahid promised improvements in the national economy and in the life conditions of the population. He once again apologized to all those affected, even to the previous government's army members and to those who work with external forces. The spokesperson also stated that they will need international help in order to stop being a production epicenter of opioids. In Kabul, the Afghan capital, thousands of people tried to board any evacuation flight that several countries of the world carry out in an unorganized and inhumane way. Airport Hamid Karzai is flooded with high levels of tension due to the state of chaos and confusion. The nation's State Department reported that over 3,200 diplomats and foreign workers have been evacuated until today, a modest number taking into account that last Sunday 88,000 people waited for a flight to leave the country. Italy managed to extract 85 Afghan collaborators. As of now, 2 Spanish aircraft await in Dubai for authorization to fly into Kabul and transport both Spanish and Afghan personnel connected to the embassy. Germany, United Kingdom, and France also try to sort out the extraction of their citizens and local collaborators, but the mission is turning out in their official versions to be very difficult, despite the several foreign offices that have already confirmed having normal talks with the Taliban. There are contradictions between the stories of Western media and the authorities, as the focus in Afghanistan now shifts to warranting a transition with as few panic and violence as possible.
We are here, and the US and British soldiers stationed here say they have orders not to let anyone into the airport. That's what we have been told.
And Israel struck a military outpost near the border city of Quneitra. According to local media reports, 2 missiles were fired in the west of the town of Hadr, in the northern Quneitra countryside. The mortars exploded across from the key border city, which has been seen to ongoing fighting between pro-regime forces and the Syrian rebels. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, a pro-opposition group that has activists on the ground in Syria, the Israeli strikes targeted areas where Iran-backed fighters are based. Hurricane season in the Caribbean Sea remains active. The United States National Hurricane Center reported that Tropical Storm Grace is moving across the Caribbean towards the Yucatan Peninsula, while Storm Henry is approaching to southern Bermudas. After leaving heavy rains that could still cause flooding and landslides in Haiti and the Dominican Republic, Grace will continue to move away from Grand Cayman today and also is expected to make landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula Thursday morning and move over the southwest Gulf of Mexico early Friday. At the same time, Henry, a smaller storm in the Atlantic, is about 130 miles south of Bermuda with maximum sustained winds of 50 kilometers per hour. Fred also weakened after making landfall in northern Florida on Monday and is now a tropical depression that threatens to bring heavy rains and flooding. In the United States, as firefighters continue to battle the massive Dixie Fire, other crews in Northern California are dealing with other growing wildfires. The Caldor Fire started southeast of the Dixie Fire in El Dorado County and has grown to about 26 square kilometers. Fire Department Chris Vestal said about 2,500 people are under evacuation orders and warnings because of the blaze, which nearly tripled in size overnight. Authorities confirmed structures were destroyed and damaged in Greasy Flats and 2 other area communities. The U.S. Forest Service said that it is operating in crisis mode, with more than double the number of firefighters deployed than at the same time a year ago. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.